So there's a charismatic phenomena that I run into every now and then as a minister who is charismatic and unapologetically so. I am not a mindless charismatic. I really believe in emphasizing sound doctrine. But one of the things that I run into is actually fairly poisonous to the heart and it can cause people to lose sight of grace. And I want to talk about it today because I want to make sure that you and myself, as a reminder to myself, that we steer clear of this mentality. So this thing that I run into every now and then is what I would call a sense of a charismatic arrogance. And it's usually among the more immature believers in the charismatic faith, which I wouldn't say, I'm not saying as a pejorative, but just as a description in general. There can creep in this mentality because of seeing some certain things in the spirit. You may have valid experiences in the spirit, such as deliverances, healings, experiencing prophecy, some of those things, where if we're not careful, sometimes can actually lead into a mentality of, we get it, they don't, as far as people in the other streams of the body of Christ. Now, there's going to be streams that don't emphasize that stuff at all. There's going to be streams that believe in it, but don't make it a primary emphasis. And the danger that we run when we experience this stuff, if we're not careful, is that we can slip into that, we get it because we've experienced XYZ and they haven't, so they really don't get it, as if those things are necessary for salvation, because it's simply not true. Now, I have run into this kind of maybe because of the circles that I run in, tend to be emphasize this stuff quite a bit more, but I think it is absolutely poisonous to the heart, and I think it causes people to lose sight of grace. And what I mean by that is when we start to think, oh, they don't get it, but I do because, or we do because, we've experienced XYZ. We forget that we only experienced any of that stuff by the grace of God. It has nothing to do with credentials. It has nothing to do with anything other than God in his grace did those certain things, such as a deliverance, a healing, prophetic, so on and so forth. We have to remember at its core that spiritual gifts are actually called charismata. In other words, they are gifts of grace. They are always gifts, and they are always by grace. And when we have this mentality of I get it, they don't, it actually causes us to lose sight of the very grace that gave it, that allowed those things to be manifested in the first place, those things to happen to us in the first place, or happen in front of us in the first place. I get that there is a sense of experiential knowledge. It is much easier to teach on healing if you are somebody that has prayed for healing and seen people healed than somebody that just strictly looks at the text. But they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think what's insanely powerful is when we can match experience and text, and we can we can teach from both. Now, one of the things that happens though is that if we allow that mentality to go in unchecked, it will actually poison the heart and it will slip into pride. And you know what it says in the Bible, that God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. And all I want to say to you is, if you want to operate in the gifts, if you want to operate in the charismata, the gifts of grace, if you want to operate in prophecy, healing, and deliverance and all of that, one of the things that you're going to have to embrace on a regular basis is constantly being in a state of humility, constantly putting these crowns back at Jesus' feet and never letting the breakthroughs that you see, or the things that have happened in front of your eyes, or the things that even happen through your own hands, it has to constantly be put at the feet of Jesus in order to remain in the realm of grace. Because if we're not careful, it can poison the heart, and we can get this mentality that we get it, they don't, because we've seen it and they haven't. And by all means, when you do that, you will absolutely lose sight of grace. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. If we want to continue in these gifts and grow in these gifts, then what we're going to have to do is to embrace this sense of humility. So if you feel that that mentality start to slip in, if you start to feel that I get it, they don't, we get it, they don't, my church gets it, their church doesn't, be super careful, because most likely it is going to be poison for your heart. It's going to cause you to lose sight of the grace that manifested the gift in the first place, and you'll actually find that you will see those gifts cut off or significantly decreased because you're being opposed for pride. I don't know how else to say it in a nice way, but if you feel your heart or your mind even subtly drifting in that direction, check it at the feet of Jesus in that moment. Stop it. Just be thankful, be grateful that God in his grace has used you in that way, or allowed you to even see that kind of breakthrough, because it is all by grace anyway. The times when spiritual gifts get very weird, the times when they go the most off track, is when we start to look at them as badges of honor or validations that we are better ministers than XYZ minister. That's not how they're meant to work. They are meant to be gifts of grace. By all means, we are meant to pursue these gifts. We are meant to go after these gifts. You cannot read 1 Corinthians 14 and come away with a different interpretation. You are meant to pursue spiritual gifts, but remember that the spiritual gifts are charismata. They are gifts of grace. And if we are going to operate in the realm of the sign gifts, if we're going to operate in spiritual gifts to their fullest, then we can never operate in those from a place that's outside of grace. Remember, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. So when you feel that mentality start to sneak up, when you hear that mentality spoken, when you just stop it right there and give thanks to God that you even have the opportunity to be used in that way, and leave it there. Because after all, none of us earn, and none of us are given these things because of some sense of merit. If that thing starts to creep up in you, just kill it right there, because I promise you, if you don't kill it there, it will kill your effectiveness in operating in these gifts.